I do think that the issue of racial disparities in the criminal justice system overall has become relevant increasingly over the years, not only nationally but internationally. And I attribute this to the advancements of technology, globalization, and the speed at which news travel today. I also think in the past we used to have a reduced amount of media outlets, and we kind of knew a little bit about their bias and where they stood politically, socially, and so we kind of understood that the information would be somewhat skewed in a direction or another one. But now with the algorithm and basically everybody being able to be a reporter, it only takes your phone, a camera, and being in the right place at the right time to record an event and then spread it out and share with the rest of the world. And I think when we do this, when the information comes from an individual, is also not censored, not filtered, it's the real deal. And so it widens our perspectives, and it's also easy to share with everybody. And so that's why I think it's in everyone's mouths, because you just can't escape the information. When it comes to the actual shooting of unarmed men, I wrote way too much, so I'm gonna try to make this shorter. I think as a society, we have been told that minorities, let's say an illegal immigrant or undocumented immigrant versus a white, blue-eyed male in a suit, we should fear the first one, and the latter one is someone we can trust, and that has been instilled in, I think, everyone's narrative. But as we read in this chapter, the numbers tell a different story. It is not true that most undocumented immigrants engage in illegal action, and the problem comes when society has been told this for so long that there's fear instilled in everybody, even law enforcement officers. And so I think about this movie that I watched once that kind of showed a Black parent teaching their children that should they ever be in a traffic stop, to put your hands on the steering wheel at all times, show your hands, don't move fast, respond to the officer at all times, and so that they don't fear that you might have a gun and would use it against them. And I think that difference already shows us the lack of power that a Black person would have in this case, and the fear that that Black person may have, especially if they are an innocent person, and also the fear of the police officer, plus maybe a sense of abuse of power or racism, which in that situation could lead to the shooting of an innocent person. And then we have a police officer who potentially shoot this person in self-defense. The other person is not there to defend themselves. And then, as we have seen as well, there's with the fact that all of the data, or many of the data collected, is voluntary and we don't really have all the numbers, it's kind of scary to really think about the fact that we may not know exactly what is happening out there, and how, depending on your race or your status in this country, you could be targeted for what we have built as a society on what to fear and what to defend. And of course, the media is going to exaggerate things or minimize depending on the story that they're trying to tell, and politics are going to try to use the information to their advantage, whether that is to collect votes and followers. And if a politician or a leader is saying that all illegal immigrants are criminals, and then we have a situation, an event in which an illegal alien commits a crime, then they're going to use that to add to the poll and to say, see, I told you so. And of course, activists are going to use it to protest and fight and continue to have the conversations that we ought to have. I do think that although the different parties respond differently to these disparities and the injustices, because it affects them differently. The media responds in a way that is going to give them jobs and viewers and listeners. They have to make a story more or less dramatic. And of course, there's funding that comes for that media from somewhere, and it depends on where that funding is coming from, the story that they'll want to share. Again, the same with politicians, depending on what values or rights or what it is that their current battle is about, they're going to use the racial disparities in order to support their message. And as far as the minorities responding to this, I think it's important to realize that oftentimes they respond with a lot of emotion, frustration, fear, anger, sadness, and that oftentimes leads to people behaving violently, which is not okay, and it should be condemned as well. But of course, sometimes I think of it as for an activist, oftentimes they're not in the shoes of a minority. They're supporting the minority, but they're not always necessarily in those shoes, and so they're able to withdraw emotionally and be able to come from a place of intellect to try and fight a battle. And that's not always the case, but that's one difference that I do see sometimes. But if you are a Black family of a Black person that was just shot by a police officer, which was completely unfair, then yeah, that family may respond differently than the activists who are working at it on a consistent basis and just coming at it from a with more perspective and kind of looking at the whole picture from a distance. And I think that in regards to the white supremacy or white people, the white privilege, it's not easy to put yourself in the shoes of someone when you haven't lived that, and so you don't have that experience. It's hard to understand the disparities. As a Latina immigrant, I often have this conversation with my white husband who struggles to understand why do we need to keep having this conversation. I just don't understand. Can we just move on? And what I try to explain is that we can move on, but we can't forget, because thanks to what has happened, we have also moved forward, and we need to continue moving forward and changing and being better. And we do that by not forgetting and by having conversations and by working on those changes for society. And so just to close, I think the biggest pro of this topic is just having the conversation, having this conversation be top of mind, because it is a tough one and not everybody wants to talk about it, but it is worth it. And it's not about convincing the other person, but I do believe in the power of conversation, because there's always new insight, there's always education. Maybe you can gain someone's sympathy, empathy, and at least we keep moving forward, and then you have a conversation with a group, and then those people have a conversation, and hopefully we can put enough positive minds that we can keep on doing good things to minimize the disparities and try to strive for more equality. And for cons, I think it's the same thing. It's not everybody is going to agree. Not everybody is happy. Some people do feel like they should be in power. Some people don't see the disparities. Some people are having so much burden in their life already that they can't fathom to even think about what the minorities down the street might be struggling with. And that's life. But I think that the most important thing is, again, coming from having those conversations, coming from a place of respect and tolerance, and always trying to listen to the other person. And the most important thing, just not fighting fire with fire. like the songs from the Beatles says, you say you want a revolution, but when you start talking about destruction, you just don't count on me. And I just butchered that song, but basically you get what I'm saying. There, we don't need to fight fire with more fire. We can have positive conversation and strive for a better world, where we all enjoy the same rights, um, unless we have done something bad, and then we should be held accountable as everyone else.